And those were qualifications to be deacons and servants in the church. And I think that speaks to what God ultimately, basically expects of fathers, of men and husbands. I want us to look today at some guys who were good fathers and some guys who weren't such good fathers. A man named Bruce Lockerbie writes a story that when he was 11 years old, he and his father went back to the old hometown. And they got in about midnight. It was late, and his dad was a little disoriented. And as much as he hated to do it, he knocked on somebody's house on the door at about midnight. And he knocked on the door and he said, after several minutes of waiting, the yard light came on, and an older man opened the door. I could hear my father apologizing for the inconvenience, and then he identified himself as the son of Pearson Lockerbie, my grandfather, dead for more than 20 years. "Oh, come in," said the old man. "No trouble at all. We knew your father." He writes, that's the greatest legacy that a man can leave his son. We knew your father. That's the legacy that every man does leave his son. Every father, every husband, we leave a legacy, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. The question is not, will I leave a legacy? The question is, what legacy will I leave? Come in. It's midnight, and I don't know you from Adam, but I knew your father. Come in. That's a legacy. Two of the greatest men in Scripture were two of the absolute worst fathers that ever lived. Kings David and Solomon. I want us to look at their failures today. We know of their successes. We always talk of the great success of David as the king, the military leader, the psalmist, all of those things. Solomon, the great builder, the wise king. They were absolute failures as fathers. And one of the reasons they failed was that they simply failed to have a presence in the life of their children. David, terrible father. David forgot his job. He forgot what he was about. Like Esau, David and Solomon despised their birthright. Their birthright as fathers. They despised their children's birthright. The birthright to have a father. To have a man who loves them and guides them and deals with them and trains them. David's job, given to him by God, his first job, was to be a husband and a father. Then, tertiary, I'll use that word twice in the same day. His third job was to be the king of Israel, not his first job. What did David see as his job? The warrior king, the warrior poet king. What a fancy job description. What a glorious job description. But he never saw himself as the father of his sons, of Adonijah, of Absalom, of the rest of his children. That was just a hobby, I guess. His job was to lead his sons to become kings and princes, and his daughters to become queens and princesses. And David utterly failed at that. Absalom tried to kill his father and tried to overtake the kingdom. Absalom was just as bad. And then later on, Absalom tried to kill Solomon, take his kingdom away from him. Rebellion and revolt. Absalom and Solomon were brothers, not father and son. But David failed to teach his children anything about being men and kings and leaders. He wasn't there. He was emotionally distant, as we like to hear and say now. Solomon was guilty of the same crime as David. His son Rehoboam, Solomon wasn't long dead, and Rehoboam said, I'll show those people what a king looks like. My little finger will be heavier on them than my father's hand. And it didn't take long for the Israelites to overthrow Rehoboam, and the kingdom of Israel was split. Civil war ensued, and that was the end of the nation that David had worked so hard to put together. Solomon was an organizational genius. David built the nation, and Solomon built the infrastructure, and they failed to raise sons, and the nation fell because of it. Think of all the misery and suffering caused because these two men didn't raise their children. They failed to be present in the lives of their children, in this case in the lives of their sons. Being present. I remember my dad would go watch me try to play baseball. I never did play baseball. I simply tried to play baseball. I remember going to watch the races, the cross-country races that my son ran in. He didn't win a single one of them. He didn't come close. But Dad was there. This guy who's a child behavioralist went to his son's preschool to observe a problem child. He doesn't say it was his son. I don't think it was. He was watching these boys talk. One child said, my dad's a doctor and he makes a lot of money and we have a swimming pool. The second kid said, my daddy is a lawyer. He flies to Washington and talks to the president. Another kid said, my dad owns a company and we have our own airplane. And this guy, David Elkins, said, and my son said, my dad's here. And he looked over at his dad. We remember those times when Daddy was there. We remember those times when our Father showed up and took care of things. When he was simply there to support us. And how we felt knowing somebody cared. The power of presence is absolutely unappreciated by us as men. Because we don't need nobody. We don't need you to be here. I can handle this on my own. But it'd be nice to have Daddy here, wouldn't it? Whether he could be or whether he can't be, it'd be nice, wouldn't it? His presence would mean more than words can say. And they did back then, and they do today, and they always will. You can't parent long distance. You can't raise kids over Facebook. You can't dad via text. I know as men, you all have jobs. You have many jobs. But the job that you have now will one day be taken up by somebody else. As much as you love your job, as good as you are at your job, as important as your job is to you, one day you will quit that job and they will plug somebody else into that position. And here's what you got to hear, guys. You will be forgotten. The work you did will not matter. The new guy will carry on, and that'll be that. The job that God gave you to raise your children will continue for as long as you live. The job that God gave you to raise your children will bear fruit all of your life, all of their life, and probably most, if not all, the life of your grandchildren. The only question is whether that fruit will be sweet or it will be bitter. Be here. Be here. Be present with and for your children. If God Almighty can come down to earth in the form of a man can't we be there for our children? David and Solomon failed because they weren't present. Another way that they failed as fathers, they had no perspective on what really mattered. And I've kind of alluded to that. David and Solomon were doers. They were kings. They had people to see and people to kill and things to do. They had armies to lead, buildings to build. A temple had to be financed. There were big projects to get done. Like I said, David built a nation. David built a people. And Solomon built an economy and a government and an empire. And a few short years after he died, it was all gone. They had no perspective on what mattered, on what was important. They did big jobs and they had big commitments. They were nation builders. They had no time for little jobs and little things and little people. They had to do the big things. The big things. When you go fishing, do you like to catch the big fish or the small fish? I like to catch the big fish. I rarely do. I got a friend, we used to go fishing a lot. We'd catch fish and he'd say, "Here, I'm going to send this to my wife," because she liked fishing too, you know. So he's doing all that Facebook stuff. He'd say, so he'd catch fish, he'd say, "Hold it closer to the camera," so that the perspective would make the fish look a lot bigger, okay? You know, fish would be this big, we'd hold it real close to the camera out there, you know, like that, and it'd look big. You've seen all those optical illusions that fool your eye, the perspective that you have. You know, you're really not holding the moon in the palm of your hand when they take your picture like that. It's perspective. Perspective is what we so often lack. We've got to make a living. We've got to make a house payment. We've got a car payment to make. We've got to feed them little critters and keep them clothed, and we don't have time to mess with them. We just got to keep them going. Perspective is so very important. There's a guy named James Boswell. He's a famous biographer. He's a famous diarist. He and his father both kept very complete diaries, intricate diaries. And they lived 200 years ago, so don't worry about who they were. But James Boswell writes of a special day in his childhood when his father took him fishing. The day was fixed in his adult mind, and he often reflected upon many of the things his father taught him in the course of that fishing experience, that one day out at the lake. After having heard of that particular excursion so often, it occurred to someone much later to check the journal that Boswell's father kept and to determine what had been said about the fishing trip from the parental perspective. The son, it was in his diary, he just wrote, "Best day ever. Spent the day fishing with Dad." So they go and read his daddy's diary. They look up the day, one sentence: "Gone fishing today with my son. A day wasted." I'm glad that James Boswell, I hope that James Boswell never read his father's diary. What a sad, sad thing. I got better things to do than spend a day with you, kid. I got better things to do than raise a son. I got better things to do than raise a daughter. A day wasted. Different perspective on the value of the day, maybe on the value of the person. David and Solomon failed to have a perspective that the kingdom needed to continue. The kingdom was going to be built on their sons. The kids were the building material for the future, and they utterly neglected it. You've heard the phrase, "For want of a nail, a kingdom falls." Well, you know how that goes. For want of a nail, a horse went unshod. For want of a horse, a knight went unmounted. For want of a knight, a battle was lost. For want of a battle, a kingdom fell. Dads, our job is to drive 1,000 million nails. It is to spend time with our children. It is to build them up. It is to love them. It is to, by our presence, tell them that they matter. Just driving a nail over and over, that holds things together. Your house is held together by a bunch of cheap nails, probably made in a foreign country I won't mention. It's not one big nail. It's not one giant bolt. It's 1,000 little nails holding it all together. That's what built your house. That's what builds men and women from boys and girls, is parents, dads, spending time with their children. For want of a father, a child is lost. Don't let that be you. So who got it right? David and Solomon failed. Who got it right? It was a lot easier to find bad dads in the Bible than it was to find good dads, I'll tell you. I think there's something about us men that's just, we're just not sometimes as good as we ought to be. I like Noah and Job. What did these guys get right? What they got right was they lived out their faith in front of their children. They were public about their faith. David and Solomon failed to be present. David and Solomon failed to have a right perspective. But Noah and Job were public in their faith. Look at Noah. What's he doing that's public about his faith? He's building a giant boat in his backyard. Everybody can see it. Everybody looks at it. And because they live in a desert, everybody laughs at it. It's like the guy who built the big, well, I don't know if y'all watch NCIS. How long has Gibbs been building that boat in his basement? And how's he going to get it out? I don't know. Noah built this boat in front of everybody. And when people asked him, Noah, why are you building that big honking boat? He said, because God told me to. We talk. We talk on a regular basis. He tells me what to make it out of. He's told me when the animals are coming. He's told me he's going to flood the world. And Noah told this to people within earshot of his children, within earshot of his kids. Everybody knew that Noah's kids had a dad who was nuts. Everybody knew that Noah heard from God. And Noah wasn't ashamed of it. Noah wasn't ashamed that his children knew what was going on. In fact, to his credit, Noah got his kids involved in his boat building ministry. The whole family built a boat. They did God's work together. Did God speak to the boys and girls? I don't think so. But they were involved. Noah, in this sense, shared his faith with his children. He shared his relationship with God with his family. And they, as a result, survived the flood because of that. He lived out his faith publicly and let his children see what he believed. That's a powerful, powerful thing. Job. In the first chapter of Job, it tells us how much Job loved his children. That his 7 sons and 3 daughters, they'd have a big party. And then Job would come along behind them, and he'd offer up sacrifices just in case there'd been any sinfulness going on at that party. Job loved his children. And I can guarantee you that those 10 kids knew that Daddy made a big sacrifice for them after they'd had a big blowout. He was telling them he loved them and that he was concerned for their spiritual welfare, that the God he worshiped should be their God too. he was not ashamed of the relationship that he had with God. In fact, it was a very, very close relationship, as we read in that book. These two men were very public about their faith with their children, with their family. Many of you men serve in church. Do you remember your daddy doing anything in church? What does it mean to a child to see his dad carry the offering plate? To see his father come up and pray at the podium or to read scripture? What does it mean to a child to stand next to their father and hold a hymnal or sing the same song? What does it mean that your son or daughter knows that you believe in God and that Jesus is your Savior? Men, fathers, live their faith out in front of their children. And we still need men to sign up for Vacation Bible School. There's your chance. They were public about their faith. We need to do that. Do your children see you worship? Do they see you pray? Do they see you go to church? Do they see your faith in action? Do they see how you face life and loss and gain within the context of your relationship with God and Jesus Christ? Do they know your salvation story? Do your kids know how you came to know Jesus? My dad told me the story. He was about 8 years old sitting in church. He said he'd been ready for a while. He said this old man who was a deacon there, one of those good old churchmen. He was the guy that always came in the middle of the winter and would light the stoves. Daddy remembers his name. I don't remember it, but he said they were at a revival and he was sitting at the back, and he said this old man probably was all of 40 years old. This old man comes up and puts his hands on his shoulder and says, "Don't you think it's about time?" He said he was down at the front before he knew what had happened to him. You have a story about you and Jesus. Do your children know it? Do you live it out? We Baptists are really, really big on a private faith. I understand that. But a faith that is so private that our children never see it is no faith at all. Job lived out his faith in public. Noah made it very clear who his God was, and their children saw that. Started this sermon with the word legacy. I want to read you about a legacy of two different fathers. You may have heard this before. It's documented. Two families from the state of New York were studied very carefully. One was the Max Jukes family. The other one was the family of Jonathan Edwards. What was discovered was that like begets like. Max Juke was an unbelieving man and married a woman of like character who lacked principle. Among their known descendants, over 1,200 were studied. 310 became professional vagrants. I don't even know what that is. How do you make a living by being a vagrant? 310 professional vagrants. 440 physically wrecked their lives by a debauched lifestyle. 130 went to prison for an average of 13 years each, 7 of them for murder. There were over 100 who became alcoholics, 60 became habitual thieves, 190 public prostitutes. Of the 20 who learned a trade, 10 of them learned that trade in prison. It cost the state about $1.5 million, and they made no contribution whatever to society. There's Max Juke's legacy. In about the same era, the family of Jonathan Edwards came on the scene, and Jonathan Edwards, a man of God, married a woman of like character, and their family began, and they became a part of this study that was made. 300 became clergymen, missionaries, and theological professors. Over 100 became college professors. Over 100 became attorneys, so they didn't all turn out. 30 of them became judges. 60 of them became physicians, and over 60 became authors of good classics and good books. 14 became presidents of universities. There were numerous giants in American industry that emerged from this family. 3 became United States congressmen, and 1 became the vice president of the United States. That's Jonathan Edwards' legacy. Now, obviously, there were some good women involved. You know, we don't have to worry about celebrating men today as if that takes away something from women. And on Mother's Day, we don't have to take away anything from daddies. It takes everybody to get us to where we can be contributing members of society. But Max Jukes left a legacy whether he knew it or liked it or not. Jonathan Edwards left a legacy. I think he knew what he was doing. Dads, you're part of a legacy. The legacy of your father, your grandfather, your family. You're the product of a legacy, but you're also continuing one in the future. Your sons and daughters, your grandchildren and great-grandchildren. You're influencing people who have yet to be created, who have yet to be. The question is not, are you going to leave a good legacy or a bad legacy? You're going to leave a legacy. Make sure it's the one you want your name associated with. That legacy is found in Jesus Christ, in being as much like the Father that we see in God as you can be. We know we fail. No one knows better and no one feels deeper the failure of a father than the father who fails. But it's not hard to succeed. Be present. Have a sense of perspective about what's important and what's not. And let your children see that you love God and that Jesus is your master. It's not that hard to leave a good legacy. Let's pray. Our Lord God, we thank you for our fathers, for the men who play such and continue to play such a pivotal role in our lives, who continue to inspire us, to instruct us, to affirm to us that we matter. We know that that's what you do for us, Father. You convince us every day that we matter. You give us instruction. You are always here for us. May we be like you, O God, not just in your holiness and your wisdom and your power, but, oh God, let us be like you, that you love your children. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. The invitation is simply for you to respond to God who loves you as a father, who is your father, to commit yourself to doing that as good as you know how, to let go of where you failed, be forgiven, and let God be God. Let him be your father. As you stand, I'll be down here to receive you. You can come down.